The whiskey-soaked air of the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, Kansas, crackled with a tension thicker than Kansas dust on a July day. April 5, 1879, and the saloon pulsed with the rough heartbeat of the frontier, card games snapping like bones, laughter barking like coyotes, and eyes flicking like vipers searching for prey. Amidst this maelstrom of vice and danger, two men, bound by a twisted thread of love and hate, stood poised for a reckoning that would etch their names into the bloody annals of Dodge City lore. Levi Richardson, a buffalo hunter with hands the size of hams and a temper hotter than a branding iron, nursed a glass of rotgut. His eyes narrowed on the figure of Frank Loving across the room. Cockeyed Frank, they called him, a one-eyed gambler with a grin as sharp as a poker player's bluff and a reputation for shooting as straight as his missing eye veered. Between them, a poisonous chasm yawned, fueled by the embers of jealousy and the ashes of betrayal. It had all started over a woman, Maddie Loving, Frank's fiery wife. Levi, a friend turned fool for her charms, had crossed an unspoken line, and the simmering tension between the two men boiled over into a street brawl that left Frank nursing a bruised jaw and Levi vowing vengeance. Weeks of taunts and veiled threats festered, culminating in this fateful night at the Long Branch. Levi felt the weight of his Colt Peacemaker on his hip, a cold comfort against the inferno in his gut. He could almost hear the whispers that snaked through the saloon, each one a barbed wire twisting the knot of anticipation in his stomach tighter. Frank, sensing the heat from across the room, met his gaze with a steely glint in his good eye, his hand hovering casually near the worn leather holster at his waist. The saloon, once abuzz with life, seemed to hold its breath as the two men locked eyes. A cough, a clink of glasses, the rustle of a petticoat, all amplified in the sudden hush. Then a voice, sharp as a rattlesnake's strike, shattered the silence. "Richardson." Frank's voice cut through the room, each word a bullet. "You got something you want to say? Spit it out before the whiskey drowns your tongue." Levi's voice, when it emerged, was a low growl. "I aim to settle our score, Loving. Right here, right now." The air crackled with electricity. In a blink, faster than a rattlesnake's strike, both men's hands were lightning blurs, drawing steel and spitting fire. The saloon erupted in chaos. Shrieking women dived for cover, gamblers scattered like spooked rabbits, and the air filled with the acrid bite of gunpowder. The first shots echoed like thunderclaps, the bullets ricocheting off walls and sending splinters flying. Levi, a storm on two legs, charged towards Frank, firing as he ran. Frank, a viper in quicksand, danced around the hail of lead, returning fire with deadly accuracy. The two figures, wreathed in gun smoke and bathed in the flickering lamplight, became a deadly ballet of lead and fury. Tables overturned, chairs splintered, and bottles shattered like fragile dreams. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the cloying sweetness of spilled whiskey. The screams of the terrified patrons seemed to blend into the cacophony of gunfire, creating a chilling symphony of chaos. Levi, his face streaked with soot and sweat, roared like a wounded bull. He fired again and again, frustration etching lines on his face like the Grand Canyon carved by time. Frank, his grin replaced by a mask of grim determination, countered each shot with deadly precision. His one good eye gleamed like a hawk's, tracking Levi's every move. The dance of death continued, a macabre waltz choreographed by hate and fueled by adrenaline. Both men were hit, Levi with a graze to the arm and Frank with a searing pain in his thigh. Despite their wounds, neither faltered. The saloon, now a war zone, became their battleground, an ominous backdrop to their relentless conflict. Suddenly, with a final ear-splitting roar, Levi's gun fell silent. He stumbled, clutching his chest, a crimson blossom blooming on his shirt. Frank, his wounds throbbing, watched as Levi crumpled to the floor, his eyes wide with disbelief. Silence, thick and suffocating, descended upon the ravaged saloon. The smoke slowly cleared, revealing the grim tableau of destruction. Levi Richardson, the buffalo hunter with a heart as wild as the plains, lay still, his dreams lost in the dust motes dancing in the slanted rays of the saloon's lamps. Frank, the one-eyed gambler, stood frozen, the gun still smoking in his hand, the weight of his actions settling like a shroud on his soul. The patrons, emerging from their hiding places, gaped at the scene, some with morbid fascination, others with raw panic. The air seemed to vibrate with the echo of the final gunshot, a stark reminder of the life extinguished in this den of vice. As the shock began to fade, a low whimper broke the silence. Sarah Warren, a bartender with fiery red hair and a heart of gold, knelt beside Levi's body, tears streaming down her face. She had always held a torch for the rough-hewn hunter, and the sight of him lifeless tore at her soul. The other patrons, shaken but alive, began to murmur amongst themselves, speculating on the events that had led to this bloody climax. The saloon doors burst open, and Deputy Marshal Duffy strode in, his steely gaze sweeping the scene. His face hardened as he saw the body and the gun in Frank's trembling hand. Duffy knew both men. Levi, a frequent patron, often seeking solace in a bottle after a long day on the plains, and Frank, a skilled card player whose presence always drew a crowd. But Duffy also knew the animosity that simmered between them, a poisonous brew fueled by jealousy and pride. "Loving," Duffy's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs. "Drop your weapon and step away from the body." Frank's hand twitched towards his holster, but he knew resistance was futile. He slowly lowered his gun, his face a mask of despair. Two burly deputies, Marshal Charlie Bassett and Deputy Marshal Duffy, moved in, disarming him and dragging him toward the jailhouse. Duffy knelt beside Sarah, his eyes meeting hers with a grim understanding. "He wouldn't have had it any other way," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with sobs. "Levi lived hard and fast, always walked the line between life and death. He died by his hand, just like he always said he would." Duffy placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. He knew Levi's penchant for self-destruction and his tendency to push his luck too far. But that didn't make his death any less tragic. As the deputies hauled Frank away, Duffy felt a pang of regret. He could have intervened and tried to diffuse the tension before it exploded into violence. But the frontier often wrote its laws, and some debts, it seemed, could only be settled in blood. The next few days in Dodge City were shrouded in a heavy pall. Levi's body lay at the undertaker's, waiting for a burial that would draw mourners from near and far. The Long Branch Saloon remained closed, its bullet-riddled walls and shattered furniture silent testaments to the bloody showdown. Frank, confined to a dimly lit cell in the jailhouse, wrestled with the demons of his actions. He had won the duel, but at what cost? News of the gunfight spread like wildfire across the frontier. Ballads were sung, stories were embellished, and Levi Richardson became a legend, a fallen hero of the Wild West. Frank Loving, however, became a pariah, forever branded as the man who gunned down a buffalo hunter in cold blood. Even with his leg wound slowly healing, the deeper wound in his soul refused to mend. As weeks passed since the gunfight, Sarah Warren, mourning Levi, left Dodge City due to unbearable memories. Frank Loving faced manslaughter charges, but his defense team successfully argued that he had acted to protect himself and his wife, leading to his acquittal. Influenced by factors like the town's tolerance for violence and the Wild West ethos, the jury released him. In the aftermath, Loving continued as a gambler, participating in gunfights and becoming part of Dodge City's legendary lore. The once vibrant gambling den, now a relic, was sold and boarded up, signaling the end of an era in the town's history. The gunfight at the Long Branch Saloon may have been a fleeting moment in the grand tapestry of Western history, but its impact resonated far beyond the dusty streets of Dodge City. It was a stark reminder of the fragile dance between life and death that played out on the frontier, a testament to the destructive power of jealousy and revenge, and a melancholic ballad of love and loss played against the backdrop of a dying era. And as the wind whistled through the abandoned saloon, whispering tales of ghosts and gunfire, Levi Richardson and Frank Loving, two men bound by a twisted thread of fate, became more than just names etched in bullet holes and ballads. They became symbols of a bygone era, a cautionary tale of the Wild West's unforgiving nature, and a haunting reminder that sometimes the deadliest battles are fought not with guns, but with the demons that reside within our hearts.